Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Monday, January 19th, 2026, and today we are breaking down leeks. We take a fun, wide-ranging series of questions about unconventional tunnel crops, tomatoes, dropping flowers, and so much more. Jam-packed today, y'all. So let's do it. All right, so happy Monday, everyone. Happy Martin Luther King Jr. Day, in fact. The kids are out of school, so that's fun. The weather is exceedingly cold outside, so I guess so much for our mild January officially. But all in all, I feel pretty good. Had a relatively laid-back weekend for the cold. Made a little homemade pasta with the kiddos, which is always a good time. I honestly don't use the pasta roller as much as I used to. A fact that, frankly, always bums me out when I make some more pasta and remember how fun it can be with the kids or how, when they get bored, meditative it can be to do on your own. I'd like to tackle some ramen at some point. Maybe that goes on the list for next week because it's just going to stay cold. Otherwise, the farm is basically a giant sheet of ice, so not much to report there. It looks as if it's pretty much going to stay that way for the next 10 days. After that, though, it is game on. Slowly. Some of you in warmer regions are gearing up for more than we are, I bet, but would love to see what you all have going on. So feel free to send your 20-second farm video clips to farmermike@no-tillgrowers.com, and we can share those here. Maybe you're doing some seed starting. Maybe you're getting your greenhouse all set up. Show us, let us know. Love to see it. Anyway, it is Monday, and on every Monday this year, we are digging into a single, less talked about crop in a series we're calling Planting and Raving. Actually, I'm the only one calling it that, but I have that authority, I guess. Somebody gave me a show. I think that was also me. Today, the crop we're going to cover is leeks. This is one of my favorite alliums to eat, but it's not always that easy to grow, and it's frankly not always very profitable, but it is freaking delicious. A good potato leek soup is one of my favorite things in the world. I love caramelizing leeks, crisping them, all the things. Customers also love leeks at the farmer's market, but also, restaurant customers, and definitely another great CSA item as well. For me, one of the best tricks, in fact, to running a great CSA is your allium offerings. I love growing alliums, and the CSA really allows you to play with the different varieties from red and white onions to gold, sweet, Walla Walla, shallots, all the forms of garlic, chives, and so on. Just the whole allium rainbow, although most of it's just kind of like green or white or a little bit of red in there. But anyway, leeks fit in there really nicely as a June or July surprise, or later, depending on your area, conveniently right around when potatoes are starting to roll out. The other thing I love about leeks is that they are really a good overwinter crop, or can be. It takes almost a year to get them there, which can be a job and takes away from the profitability. But the idea is that you start them in the summer. Our No-Till Growers co-founder Jackson always said start them around Father's Day, which is what we go with, and so late June here. And then plant them in the fall in a tunnel or under a lot of row cover, and then harvest starting in March. We've had decent luck with that approach over the years here in Zone 6B. You just have to get them out before they flower, because they are going to flower if they go through a full winter. Now, in the third segment, I'll talk more about the actual growing of the leeks, including blanching. But in the first segment on these Mondays, I like to break down some of the basics. First, leeks are a very long season crop. Like onions, they are started in the winter and not harvested until summer, or started in the summer and not harvested until like March. Also, like onions, it's hard to charge what they are actually worth, which is one reason I like to overwinter leeks, because they are growing when not much else is. That's a nice time to have stuff in your garden when it's not competing with other stuff for space. We typically start ours in trays, either sprinkling the seed over the tray, like you would, say, very light microgreens, or starting them in individual blocks. We've found that either way really works fine for us. The reality is that we will ultimately be planting them bare root, meaning there's really no block attached anyway, to get them as deep into the soil as possible. So it really doesn't matter if they are started in blocks like the onions are for us, or if they're just sprinkled on top of a tray and then pulled from that later. The leeks will just need to be kept watered with some fertility added, like fish hydrolysate, to keep them growing tall inside of the trays. They will germinate okay, just slowly at like lower temps. So preferably you get them to that 75 degree or 25 degree Celsius mark. Now, in terms of varieties, there are some day length options ranging from 70 days for the King Richard variety to 120 days for things like Bandit and every day length in between, honestly. The shorter day length varieties can come in handy if you're growing baby leeks for a chef, for instance, or want to plant a succession, starting everything all at once, but pulling the, like shorter day length varieties first, followed by the longer and longer ones. That way it's start and then later plant all at once instead of having to start and plant them every week or two. And one note on leek seeds and all other allium seeds, these are not super long lasting. So if you ordered leek seed like last spring, and unless you kept them in ideal conditions, the germination rate's going to dive quite a bit. So if you did that and you're wanting to use them, I would just like double seed your blocks or just expect to have to do more seeding to get the same number of leeks, or just buy fresh seed or whatever. For marketing, we typically would bunch them and sell 2 leeks for $3 at farmer's market, which was still probably too cheap, depending on the spacing you go with, which again, we'll discuss that in the third segment. You're looking at roughly 450 plants per 200 square feet. So if you only get 225 units, 2 leek bunch off that space, it's like $675 for that bed, which is roughly half of what lettuce will fetch. So how we have often dealt with that, like sort of low profitability element of this is to grow them in between head lettuce crops so we can better maximize that space and the amount of time that it takes up. We've even been able to get 2 rounds of lettuce before having to harvest the leeks, though I do generally recommend people not push it like that until they, are really good at growing both crops individually. And of course, like managing the weeds and all the things that come along with it. Now, on a backyard scale, that same thing applies. They can slot in nicely around other shorter crops, making it easier to make an excuse to grow leeks. Of course, today, feel free to let us know your leek strategies, and we'll get back to the actual growing of the leeks in the third segment. But first, we're going to take a wide-ranging set of questions from unconventional tunnel crops to thinning fruit clusters and more. Be right back. Can't wait to find out what more means. Today's episode is brought to you by High Mowing Organic Seeds. High Mowing Organic Seeds is celebrating their 30th anniversary with 48 fabulous new varieties for 2026. Highlights include downy mildew-resistant cucumbers, a poppy that looks like cotton candy, and 12 new tomato varieties. High Mowing offers more than 750 varieties of certified organic, non-GMO vegetables, flowers, herbs, and cover crops, all trialed for optimal performance in organic growing systems. High Mowing has the professional quality seeds and supportive grower reps to get you from seed to harvest. Visit highmowingseeds.com to request a catalog and use code 26NOTILL, all caps, for 10% off your order of $100 or more. That's highmowingseeds.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by Ohio Earth Food. So you got your soil tested or need your soil tested, it's time to contact Ohio Earth Food. Since 1972, they have been growers' trusted source for organic soil amendments to apply before you plant to prevent those deficiency symptoms that limit production. Their knowledgeable staff have all been a part of certified organic operations and can help you choose the best products for your soil and deliver or ship them right to your farm. With locations in Northwest Ohio and just north of Madison, Wisconsin, Ohio Earth Food wants to be your partner for organic inputs. Don't count on luck this year. Start your seeds in the Seed Catapult potting soil and put their Revita fertilizers in your beds, and rest assured that your plants will have all the nutrients, stimulants, and energy for whatever comes their way. Feed your soil and let your soil feed the plants. Visit them at ohioearthfood.com. All right, back to the show. If you, the listener or viewer, are enjoying this podcast, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere that questions come in, but I will always get to your Patreon questions. Now, today's Patreon question comes to us from Patreon member farmer Andrew, who is in Zone 5B and asks a good series of questions. So instead of reading them all and then restating them later, I'm just going to read each question one at a time and then answer it, and then we'll move on to the next one. The first one that Andrew asks is, quote, thoughts on thinning tomato flower/fruit clusters. We have always struggled with our high tunnel tomatoes having a huge set on the first 2 or so clusters and then aborting flowers on the next few, leaving us with lower production during what should be peak season. We have tried shade cloth to reduce temperature, but that hasn't seemed to help much. I know it could be a nutrient issue as well, but have heard of growers thinning fruit clusters. Maybe this would help with our issue, end quote. Okay, so indeed, temperature can be a factor in blossom drop, but in 5B, I would imagine that doesn't happen very often in the field, but it may happen in your tunnel. In tunnels with with good ventilation here in Kentucky, it's very rarely an issue. That said, if you do have poor ventilation in your tunnel, then it isn't impossible, and even, like shade cloth won't be enough to cool the air down in there. In the summertime, your tunnel should almost feel cooler than outside. If it doesn't, then it's probably a ventilation issue. It should be able to open up enough or have enough fans that plastic acts more like shade, and it shouldn't trap a bunch of that heat. If it does that, that will cause some blossom drop. Now, in a situation where it is well ventilated and it is cool in there, it could be pollinators, or indeed it can be a nutrient issue. Moisture might also play a role, so make sure your irrigation is adequate. For pollinators, you need more and different flowers throughout the season across the property, but especially nearish the tomatoes. For nutrients, hit up your soil test and or take a sap analysis mid-season and see just like what's missing. What are the plants not getting? And of course, I don't want to guess from here and then throw something off. If you were to trim off the fruit clusters, what you're really going to do is get bigger fruit, but not necessarily stop the blossom drop. Though it could be a factor, just depending on whether or not the plant decides it has enough nutrients to support the amount of progeny that it wants to make. For me, I would address those other things first, and then if it gets to the point when I'm still not having success, maybe look into additional things like dropping some fruit clusters. Love that question. All right, second question, quote, what would you recommend for cover cropping beds for blocks for an entire season? I was thinking of peas/oats in the spring, cutting them down before they go to seed, then following with sorghum Sudan grass/sun hemp, but thought that something like a clover would be less work. My only concern is having to terminate the clover the following season, end quote. Yeah, this is a great question. I sort of answered a similar question on Friday, so I'll just add to it that clover is going to be a problem with like things like seeds. It isn't going to last the whole season. I kind of like your original plan better. So if you use something like crimson clover or maybe Austrian winter pea for a winter hardy legume, it's much easier to kill than say like white clover. Plus you won't really have the seed issue unless you really let it go to seed. Your challenge with each will just be making sure that each of those cover crops as they go needs to be terminated well, and then having a plan for how to successfully like plant the next cover crop. But yeah, there are very few crops that just are going to last the whole season and make sense, because even clovers are going to do things like go to seed and then, kind of drop down and let other stuff grow through them. So yeah, third question, quote, I know you grow cucumbers in your tunnel. I was wondering about pest protection. I know some growers screen their tunnels, but I'm not interested in blocking out pollinators/beneficials. I assume that the approach would be to use row cover or insect netting until the plants are established, then remove the cover and trellis like tomatoes with 1 liter. We have pretty high cucurbit pest pressure here, end quote. And yeah, that's pretty much it. If you don't want to screen the whole tunnel, we don't, cover the cukes in insect netting for as long as you can, generally until flowering, and then trellis them up. Really focus on fertility for those. That will help tremendously with the pest pressure. Also, pest cycles. If you plant the cucumbers a little later, that can help with things like cucumber beetles, which come out earlier, and then after about 4 weeks of frost, their cycle dims a little bit. So you could think about planting your cucumbers a little later, or your early plantings. Just keep them covered absolutely as long as you can stand, and get some of those self-pollinating varieties. That will help as well. Then question 4, Andrew writes, quote, we have extra tunnel space beyond what we need for tomatoes next season. I was wondering what unconventional crops you might suggest for filling the space in the summer. We have had success with things like kale, chard, and parsley, but have found that zucchini did not produce well. I'm thinking onions might work. Thanks so much, end quote. Okay, that's a fun question. My go-to answer with unusual tunnel crops is almost always beets, because as I've said before, the greens just flourish in the tunnel. Another one could be kale or leafy greens. Kale is nice because you could theoretically plant that in the late winter and harvest for a full year until it flowers in March, which you could also harvest for chefs or for CSAs. Then, of course, baby greens are a classic. That's a high profit, fast growing, easy to manage crop. No brainer there. Onions, I'm fine with onions. Onions are day length triggered. So, you're really kind of setting yourself up for a very specific amount of time. For me, it just makes as much sense to plant them in the field as anywhere else. Like, they don't necessarily benefit from being in the tunnel like, for instance, beet greens do, or kale does, and that sort of stuff. Anyway, fun list of questions there. Really broke up the Leek show well, but we will take a quick break, and then when we come back, we're going to plug the Leek. Great farmer band name, if you need one, unless it's already taken. And then you're just going to have to take it, I guess. That's a conundrum. Be right back. Today's episode is brought to you by Johnny's Selected Seeds. Johnny's Selected Seeds is a proud supporter of Growers Daily. At Johnny's, they do more than sell seeds. They grow them. They trial them to see how they perform on Johnny's research farm in Maine and across the U.S. and Canada. Only the best varieties are added to their catalog and website. When you need proven varieties you can count on and detailed guidance from seedling to harvest, consider Johnny's your trusted growing partner. JohnnySeeds.com. That's JohnnySeeds.com. All right, back to the show. All right, so let's pretend that you've grown your leeks out in trays until they are roughly 6 to 8 inches tall. That's 15 to 20 centimeters. A little taller is even better. Shorter transplants are fine, but the whole goal with leeks is to grow them as tall as you can in trays, or at least as tall as you want the blanch to be, the blanch being the white part. Now, you can blanch them more or less than that. That's up to you. But if you only grow them like 2 inches or so in the tray, you can't really plant them 8 inches down. So if you really want a deep blanch on those sorts of plants, you would have to hill them a ton as they grow, or collar them, which, albeit how the professional, like prize-winning leek blanchers do it, is absolutely not going to be worth the time on any sort of production scale, but is definitely worth your time to Google, because holy moly. This blanch, though, is why I'm not recommending direct seeding them. Not only are they slow to grow and germinate, you will just not get the blanch on them that you desire. Customers generally want a good blanching, so growing them tall in trays and burying them deep is the key, as the soil around them will help get them that like white blanched look that you're after. To get that, transplant deep into the hole, you can use something like a dibbler. They even make like little rollers that punch holes really deep, which will help speed up the process. Or you can just kind of do it on your knees with a trowel or something, and you make a deep hole, you drop it in, you cover it as much as you can, and keep preferably about 2 inches of leaves above the soil. Leeks are planted at around 6 inches apart. That's like 15 centimeters, in rows about 12 inches apart, or 30 centimeters. I typically kind of just split the difference and use our gritter to plant them around 7.5 by 7.5 inches apart in a grid, or that's like 19 by 19 centimeters. And that's really just for convenience, and because that gritter is there and it makes things easier. If I'm shooting for an early summer crop, I'll do this in mid-March in the field, this planting. If I'm shooting for a March harvest crop, I'll plant them in September or so. In our climate, Zone 6B, Kentucky, they do okay in the field over winter, under cover. Tunnel is better, but not everyone has one of those, a high tunnel. So you just need some sort of frost protection in the fields. Warmer climates can maybe get away with little to no cover. Colder climates would probably want to go with growing in the tunnel, probably even under a little cover, as leeks are not, for instance, quite as hardy as, like, say, garlic, which doesn't need covering. For bed prep, draining is key because they are buried so deep, right? Like, you don't want soppy, heavy, wet soil to grow your leeks in. If you are only going to broad fork one crop, I'd say leeks are your dudes. You just really don't want them sitting in deep and cold soil for any longer than they have to. So opening it up a little bit with a broad fork can help. Some people will plant them into hills for that reason. The higher up, the better, like just really deep hills, plant the leeks. Leeks, like most crops, like a nice, a well-draining, balanced soil. A good slow-release fertilizer like feather mill will help as well. But obviously, compost is always a great option for leeks, especially if it's also acting like a mulch to help blanch them. For growing them, for us, it's pretty hands-off. Just keep them weed-free as much as possible, save for whatever you interplant with them, and allow them to get the size that you desire, which can take quite a while. If you have concentrations of thrips or onion maggots in general, like if that's a typical problem you have, then covering them with insect netting will help, and also, of course, work on your soil fertility plus beneficial habitat always. That will help keep pests down. For hilling them, you can add compost layers or just physically hill the soil up around them to increase that blanch. You can also add hay, straw, compost, or whatever as a mulch if you want to. Most people simply go with using the soil because it's easy, cheap, and right there. The big risk with using soil to blanch them is constantly bringing up new weed seeds, and then also the risk of erosion. Now, harvesting can be a difficult task in thick soils because you don't want to break the leeks or cut them with a spade shovel. So you often, or at least we do, gently pop the soil around them, and then pull the leek out kind of from as low on the base as you can grab. And I'm just doing that with a spade shovel, literally sticking the spade shovel or the broad fork next to them, kind of just lightly popping that soil and then just yanking them out really carefully so as not to snap them or rip them, whatever the term would be for kind of like a mushy vegetable. Tear them? We usually bunch them in the field, but it also depends on the outlet. Chefs don't always want them in bunches, so we may skip that step if we're selling to a specific chef. Then it's just about, like trimming the roots, washing them, squaring off the tops if you like that look or the customer likes that look, and then storing. We go with drying them off and storing them in the walk-in cooler or fridge. They can also store for several weeks just in boxes, so long as the cooler is humid enough, which it generally is in the peak of the season for us because there is so much moisture in the air and on the produce going into the walk-in. And that's kind of the deal. What did I miss or get wrong on the leak front? Let me know. Otherwise, leak this video if you leak this video. We are done here this Monday. See what I did? That was kind of a throwback to old videos. Anyway, don't forget No-Till Growers is now a nonprofit 501c3, so donations are tax deductible and greatly appreciated. And in fact, Patreon members, go over to the Patreon page. There is a little post for you if you want to get involved a little bit with No-Till Growers on the nonprofit side. Please make sure to like and subscribe and or follow wherever you're getting this podcast. That's an easy way to help us out as well. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors. And if you'd ever like to sponsor this show, you can reach out to Farmer Michelle at notillgrowers.com. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music, Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing, and also my wife Hannah for absolutely everything in the world. Also, shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear. Pick up a hat or a copy of my book, The Living Soil Handbook, at notillgrowers.com to support our work. Big thank you to everyone over there at patreon.com/notillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, you sign up in the month of January, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs today to Kaylin Gruber, and a couple bump ups. Shouts to Tom Welsh and Dwight Yoder. Bump ups, love it. You all are amazing. Thank you for the support and the increasing support. Always absolutely an honor. Really appreciate you all. And I appreciate you with a weird story. So this week's story is going to be about an older gentleman named Gary. He's a fisherman, specifically a fly fisherman, loves fly fishing, retired from a lifetime in the military, and now it is just all fishing. His travel is based around fly fishing. His days are spent in creeks and streams all over the world. On days he can't fish for whatever reason, he's reading about it, studying it, tying flies. He lives, in fact, on a property with a nice creek for smallmouth bass. So when he doesn't have a trip planned, he just goes out to his own creek and fishes. It took him 40 years of service to get to this point that this is all he could do. But he's there and he's staying there and he's happy, that is, until what he finds at his creek one Monday morning. What is it? Well, that is for tomorrow, a Tuesday morning, assuming we get some signups, on Fisher. Oh, man. No, the title's way better than that, but you're going to have to wait for it. All right. Thanks for watching and or listening. We'll see you then. Bye.